He traded his loyal wife for a model half his age, thinking he'd found happiness. But years later he freezes when he sees 3 children who are unmistakably his. Subscribe now and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. The Chicago skyline glittered like a constellation against the night sky, its lights reflecting off Lake Michigan in rippling waves of gold and silver. From his corner office on the 47th floor, Alex Mercer could see it all. The city that had once seemed so impossibly vast now sprawled beneath him like a conquered kingdom. At 42 he had achieved what most men only dreamed of, a tech empire built from nothing but raw ambition and relentless drive, a name that commanded respect in boardrooms across the country, and wealth that had long since passed the point of practical measurement. Meridian Technologies had started in a garage. Isn't that how all the great success stories begin? With nothing but a borrowed laptop and an idea that everyone said was 10 years ahead of its time. Perhaps that had been the spark that ignited his determination, the doubt in their eyes when he outlined his vision, the polite skepticism that bordered on pity. Alex had never been a man who accepted limitations, especially ones imposed by others. He turned from the window, his reflection fading as he moved across his office. The space was a testament to his success. Minimalist furniture crafted from rare woods, original artwork that appreciated faster than most people's retirement accounts, and technology so seamlessly integrated into the environment that it seemed to anticipate his needs before he expressed them. Everything was curated, controlled, perfect, just the way he liked it. His phone buzzed against the polished surface of his desk. Another notification from Vanessa. Running late. Order for me? Something light XO. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Vanessa Collins. 27 years old. Eyes that made men forget their own names. A marketing executive with an MBA from Stanford and a body that belonged on magazine covers. She had walked into a board meeting 6 months ago, presented a rebranding strategy that had increased their market share by 12%, and completely upended his life. Alex texted back a quick reply, his fingers moving across the screen with practiced efficiency. He was due at Calum in 20 minutes, the most exclusive restaurant in the city, where reservations were typically booked 3 months in advance unless your name carried the weight that his did. The maitre d' would greet him by name, lead him to his usual table by the window, and have a glass of Macallan 25 waiting. The routine of success. The currency of power. As he gathered his coat and keys, his gaze fell on the single framed photograph that remained on his desk, the only personal item in an otherwise impersonal space. Sarah. Her smile still reached her eyes in that picture, taken on a rare vacation to the coast years ago. Her hair was lighter then, sun-streaked and wind-blown, her hand raised to keep it from whipping across her face. He remembered taking that photo, remembered the sound of her laughter carried away by the ocean breeze, remembered thinking that he had never seen anything so beautiful. Sarah had believed in him when belief was the only currency he had. She had worked double shifts at an underfunded public school to keep their lights on while he chased his dreams. She had sat beside him on their second-hand couch night after night, reviewing business plans, suggesting improvements, challenging his assumptions, her teacher's mind bringing clarity to his chaotic vision. She had been his foundation when the ground seemed determined to shift beneath his feet. And now she was a stranger living in a house he still technically owned, teaching at a school he could have rebuilt from the ground up with a fraction of his annual bonus, living a life that no longer intersected with his own. The decision hadn't been made lightly. He wasn't that kind of man, the cliché of success, trading his first wife for a younger model at the first opportunity. It had been gradual, the slow drift of 2 people moving in different directions. Sarah had remained unchanged, still dedicated to her students, still bringing home stories of small victories in overcrowded classrooms, still wearing clothes she'd bought on sale, even when he could afford to buy her anything she wanted. He had offered her the world, but her world had remained stubbornly small, centered around her classroom and her community projects. She had turned down the luxury vacations, the jewelry, the offers to fund her own private school. "That's not who we are, Alex," she would say, her voice gentle but firm. But that was the problem, it was who he had become. The elevator doors opened silently and Alex stepped inside, his reflection multiplied in the mirrored walls. The man who stared back at him was a stranger to the hungry kid who had grown up on the South Side, who had clawed his way into college on scholarships and sheer determination, who had fallen in love with a girl whose faith in him had seemed like a miracle. The night he had told Sarah he was leaving, she hadn't cried. That had surprised him. He had prepared for tears, for accusations, for the emotional storm that would make him feel both guilty and justified. Instead, she had looked at him with those steady brown eyes, eyes that had once seen only the best in him, and asked, "Is this really what you want, Alex?" And he had said yes because in that moment it was. He had wanted the freedom, the newness, the intoxicating feeling of being with someone who saw him as he was now, not as the struggling dreamer he had been. Vanessa understood ambition. She spoke his language. She moved through his world with the same hunger that had driven him to create it. The divorce had been civilized, almost anticlimactic. Sarah had asked for little: their original home in the suburbs, a modest settlement that his lawyers had called almost insultingly reasonable, and a clean break. No drawn-out court battles, no vindictive demands. Like everything else about Sarah, her exit from his life had been dignified and without drama. As his private car pulled away from the gleaming glass tower of his corporate headquarters, Alex felt the familiar surge of anticipation at the thought of seeing Vanessa. She challenged him, excited him, made him feel alive in ways he had almost forgotten. With her, he was Alexander Mercer, CEO and visionary. With her, his success wasn't something to apologize for or downplay, it was celebrated, admired, leveraged. This was the life he had built. This was what he had wanted. And if sometimes in the quiet moments before sleep claimed him, he found himself thinking of a sun-drenched coastline and laughter carried away by the wind, well, that was the price of progress. Nothing worth having came without cost. The restaurant was exactly as expected. The subtle hush of money and influence, the warm glow of perfectly calibrated lighting designed to flatter every face, the discreet nods of recognition as he was led to his table. Vanessa arrived 15 minutes later, turning heads as she moved through the room, a vision in a dress that cost more than what most people made in a month. "Sorry I'm late," she said, her voice carrying just the right blend of contrition and confidence. The campaign meeting ran over. Alex watched as she settled into her chair, a predatory grace in her movements. "Successful, I hope?" She smiled, a flash of perfect white against red lips. "Of course. You don't pay me to fail, Alex." And that was true. Success was the language they shared, the common ground on which they had built whatever this was between them. Not love, not yet, but something with its own gravitational pull. Something that felt like power. As the evening unfolded in a blur of expensive wine and carefully plated cuisine, Alex found himself playing his part with practiced ease. The attentive partner, the business visionary, the man who had everything under control. And if a small voice whispered that something was missing, that this perfect tableau lacked something essential, well, he had become quite skilled at silencing such doubts. After all, this was the life he had chosen. The life he deserved. The culmination of everything he had worked for. And no one, not even the ghost of Sarah's disappointed gaze, could convince him otherwise. What Alex couldn't know, what he wouldn't discover until it was almost too late, was that across the city, in a modest house with a garden that bloomed despite the urban surroundings, Sarah Mercer was sitting in her doctor's office, her hands gripping the armrest of the chair as she tried to process the words that had just shattered her world. "Mrs. Mercer, I'm going to need you to breathe. I know this is unexpected, but let's take this one step at a time." Sarah's voice was barely audible. Can you repeat that?" The doctor's face softened with understanding. "You're pregnant, Sarah. And based on the ultrasound, you're carrying triplets." The room seemed to spin around her, the doctor's voice fading into a distant buzz as Sarah placed a protective hand over her still flat stomach. Triplets. 3 lives growing inside her, 3 children she would have to raise alone, 3 pieces of the man who had walked away without a backward glance. The timing couldn't have been more cruelly ironic. The divorce papers had been signed just 3 weeks ago, the ink barely dry on the document that had officially ended 12 years of marriage. And now this, a biological connection that would bind them forever, regardless of legal declarations. As Sarah stumbled from the doctor's office into the crisp autumn air, her mind raced with questions for which there were no easy answers. Should she tell him? Did he have a right to know? What would he do with that knowledge? Would he see these children as an inconvenience, a complication in his carefully curated new life? The Alex she had married, the man who had once talked about building a family with her when the time was right, that man would have been overjoyed. But the Alex who now existed in glass towers and exclusive restaurants, who had traded their shared dreams for a different kind of future, that man was a stranger to her. Sarah's hand tightened around her keys as she made her decision. She would protect these children, her children, from becoming an afterthought in their father's grand narrative. They deserved better than to be the regrettable complication of a marriage that had failed, better than to be shuttled between worlds that never quite connected. She would tell him eventually. But not yet. Not until she had built something solid around herself, a foundation that couldn't be shaken. These children would be born into love, into certainty, into a world where they were the priority, not the aftermath. As the sun set over Chicago, two people who had once shared everything now stood at the precipice of futures they couldn't possibly anticipate, separated by choice, by circumstance, and by the three tiny heartbeats that would one day bring their worlds crashing back together. The years that followed passed in a blur of contradictions. Moments that seemed eternal in their difficulty and yet vanished with frightening speed. Sarah had never imagined she would face motherhood alone, let alone with three infants whose very existence tested the limits of her strength, her patience, and her heart. The first year was the hardest. Sleep became a distant memory, a luxury she recalled with nostalgic longing during the endless cycle of feedings, diaper changes, and soothing cries that seemed to overlap in relentless waves. She had moved from the suburban house that held too many memories into a modest brownstone in a quieter neighborhood, using part of her settlement to secure a home where her children could grow with stability, if not extravagance. She had left her teaching position at the public school, the schedule impossible to maintain with triplets who needed her constant attention. Instead, she had pivoted to educational consulting, working from home between naps and feedings, building a client list of private schools that valued her expertise in curriculum development. It wasn't the classroom she loved, but it kept her connected to education while providing the flexibility motherhood demanded. Help came in unexpected forms. Former colleagues organized meal trains in those early months. Neighbors she barely knew offered to watch the babies for an hour so she could shower or simply breathe. Her parents, retired and living in Florida, had come for the first 6 weeks, her father assembling cribs with quiet efficiency while her mother taught her the rhythms of caring for multiple infants at once. But they couldn't stay forever, and eventually, Sarah found herself truly alone with the three small lives that depended on her for everything. On the hardest nights, when all three cried at once and her body ached with exhaustion, she would sometimes allow herself a moment of anger at Alex, for his absence, for his ignorance, for the ease with which he had walked away never knowing what he had left behind. Those moments never lasted. Looking at Emma, Noah, and Lily, names she had chosen for their simplicity, their strength, their lack of connection to either of their families, she couldn't bring herself to regret the path that had brought them to her, even with its desperate difficulties. Emma had been the first to be born, arriving 2 minutes before her siblings, and she carried that firstborn energy in everything she did. Even as an infant, her eyes were alert, taking in the world with an intensity that sometimes startled adults. She was the first to roll over, the first to sit up, the first to reach for toys with determined little hands. By the time she was 18 months old, she had established herself as the unquestioned leader of the trio, deciding which games they would play and mediating disputes with toddler diplomacy. Noah came second, quieter than his sisters but with a watchfulness that missed nothing. Where Emma charged forward, Noah observed. His first steps were delayed compared to his sisters, not because he couldn't walk but because he seemed to be studying the mechanics of it, unwilling to attempt until he had solved the puzzle in his mind. Once he started, he rarely fell. His caution extended to everything: new foods, new people, new experiences, but beneath it lay a curiosity that ran deep and true. Lily was the last to arrive, smaller than her siblings by almost a pound, with a delicate constitution that had kept Sarah awake through too many nights of worry. What she lacked in physical robustness she made up for in sensitivity. Lily was the one who noticed when another child was upset at playgroup, the one who brought her stuffed rabbit to anyone who was crying, the one who seemed to absorb emotions from the very air around her. She was also the one who most resembled Alex, with his striking blue eyes and the small furrow that appeared between her brows when she concentrated. They were extraordinary, these three children who shared the same face and yet were so distinctly themselves. Sarah watched them grow with a mixture of wonder and terror, wonder at their resilience, their joy, their uncomplicated acceptance of the world as they found it, terror at the immensity of raising them without the safety net a partner would have provided, at the countless ways the world could harm them, at the questions that would inevitably come. By the time they were 4, the questions had started in earnest. "Mommy, why doesn't Jenny have a daddy?" Emma asked one evening as Sarah tucked her into bed, her small face serious in the warm glow of the nightlight. Sarah's heart constricted, but she had prepared for this, had rehearsed the words that would provide truth without burden. Some families have a mommy and a daddy. Some have 2 mommies or 2 daddies. Some, like ours, have just a mommy. Families look different, but they're all made of love. Emma considered this with the gravity of a judge weighing evidence. But we had a daddy once, right? Because Tommy said everyone has a daddy, even if they don't live with them. Sarah sat on the edge of the bed, smoothing Emma's dark curls back from her forehead. "Yes, you have a daddy. He lives far away and has a different life now. Did he see us when we were babies?" Noah had appeared in the doorway, his favorite book clutched against his chest, his expression unreadable. Sarah's throat tightened. This was the complication of having 3 children the same age. Conversations were rarely contained, questions came from multiple directions at once. No, he didn't. He left before you were born. Did he not want us? Lily's small voice came from behind Noah, her lower lip trembling slightly. Oh, sweetheart, no. Sarah opened her arms, and Lily climbed into her lap, nestling against her shoulder. He didn't know about you. He made a choice to live a different life before I even knew you were growing inside me. If he knew about us, would he want us? This from Noah, his analytical mind always seeking the logical progression. Sarah hesitated. Once she would have said yes without doubt. The Alex she had married had talked of having children someday, had spoken with warmth about being a better father than his own had been. But that Alex had disappeared long before the divorce, replaced by a man whose ambitions had reshaped him into someone she barely recognized. I don't know, she answered honestly. But I want you more than anything in the world. You 3 are the best thing that ever happened to me. For now that was enough. They were still young enough that their world centered around her, around the home she had built for them, around the routines and rituals that made them feel secure. But Sarah knew these questions would return, would evolve and deepen as they grew older and began to understand the complexities of adult choices, of absence, of the space a missing parent leaves in a child's life. The morning routine had long since settled into a choreographed dance of efficiency. Sarah woke at 5:30 to shower and prepare for the day before the children stirred. By 6:15 she was making breakfast, different versions of the same basic meal to accommodate each child's preferences. Emma liked her toast cut into triangles with the crusts left on. Noah wanted his cut into rectangles with the crusts removed. Lily ate hers whole but required a specific ratio of peanut butter to jelly that Sarah had perfected over time. Emma, please stop kicking the table, Sarah said without looking up from the lunches she was packing. Noah, did you finish your math worksheet? I did it last night, Noah replied, carefully arranging his crayons in rainbow order beside his plate. Miss Garcia said I'm the best at subtraction. That's because you're a genius, Sarah said, dropping a kiss on top of his head as she placed his lunchbox in his backpack. Mom, can we go to the park after school today? Lily asked, her voice still carrying the slight huskiness of sleep. The one with the duck pond? We'll see, sweet pea. I have a meeting with a client at 4, but if it doesn't run long, maybe we can stop by for a little while. You always say we'll see, and that means no, Emma grumbled, stabbing at her scrambled eggs with unnecessary force. Sarah sighed, checking the clock. It means I'm not sure yet. Now finish your breakfast, please. Miss Chun will be here in 15 minutes to take you to school, and I need you all dressed and teeth brushed before she arrives. Chen Li had been their nanny for the past 2 years, a graduate student in early childhood education who watched the triplets on the days Sarah had in-person client meetings. She was the closest thing to consistent childcare Sarah had managed to find, and the children adored her. Can Chen take us to the park? Emma, ever the negotiator, had spotted a potential workaround. I'll text her and ask if she's free after school, Sarah conceded, knowing when to pick her battles. But only if you 3 cooperate this morning. That means clothes on, teeth brushed, beds made. The promise of the park worked its magic, and within 10 minutes, all 3 children were dressed in the outfits Sarah had laid out the night before, their wild morning hair tamed into reasonable order. Sarah helped Lily with the buttons on her cardigan while Emma proudly demonstrated her newfound ability to tie her own shoes. Noah carefully placed his homework folder in his backpack, double-checking that nothing was missing. Miss Chin arrived precisely on time, her calm presence immediately soothing the edges of the morning chaos. Good morning, Mercers. Are we ready for a great day? The children swarmed around her, each vying to tell her about their plans and hopes for the day. Sarah used the distraction to gather her own work materials, checking her calendar one last time to confirm her appointments. I should be back by 3 unless traffic is terrible, she told Chin. I've asked the Westbrook Academy to send their curriculum docs ahead of time, so if they email, could you print them for me? Of course, Chin nodded. Don't worry about a thing here. We'll be fine. Sarah knelt to give each child a goodbye hug and kiss, the same words whispered to each. Be kind, be brave, be you. I love you to the moon and back. It was their ritual, these words passed between them each morning. A reminder of what mattered, a thread connecting them through the hours they were apart. As she watched Chin lead the children toward the waiting car, their backpacks bouncing with each step, Sarah felt the familiar tug of impossible emotions, The fierce pride in their growing independence mingled with the ache of time passing too quickly. 4 years gone in the blink of an eye, each milestone both celebrated and mourned as the babies they had been transformed into the people they were becoming. She hadn't told Alex. Not when they were born, their arrival 6 weeks early sending her into a panic that had nothing to do with the physical demands of delivering 3 infants and everything to do with the fear of what came next. Not during those first brutal months of adjustment, when survival had been her only goal. Not in the years that followed as she built a life centered around their needs, their schedules, their futures. The decision had started as self-protection. The thought of introducing chaos into the precarious balance she had achieved, of subjecting her children to a father who might view them as an obligation rather than a gift, had been unbearable. Then it had evolved into something more complicated. A life constructed without space for his presence, children who didn't know to miss him, a narrative in which his absence was normal rather than a wound. Sarah had told herself she would know when the time was right, when the children were old enough, when she was strong enough. But the right time never seemed to arrive, and the longer she waited, the more impossible the conversation became. How did you tell a man he had 3 4-year-old children he had never known? How did you explain to those children that their father had been kept from them by your choice? There were no easy answers, no painless paths forward. So Sarah did what she had been doing since the day she had walked out of that doctor's office with the knowledge of 3 lives growing inside her. She focused on the next necessary thing. Today that was a meeting with a prestigious private school that wanted to revamp their elementary science curriculum. Tomorrow it would be something else. And through it all, she would love her children with everything she had, hoping it would be enough to fill the space where a father should have been. What Sarah couldn't know, what she couldn't possibly anticipate, was that across the city, in a glass tower that stretched toward the sky, Alex Mercer sat in a boardroom discussing his company's latest philanthropic initiative, a substantial donation to support arts education in underprivileged schools. A donation that would include a gala fundraiser featuring performances by the very children it aimed to help. A gala where fate would finally force the collision of worlds that had been spinning in separate orbits for too long. 4 years had reshaped Alex Mercer's life in ways both expected and surprising. Meridian Technologies had expanded globally, its value tripling under his relentless leadership. The penthouse had been traded for a modernist mansion overlooking Lake Michigan, its sleek architecture featured in design magazines. Success had bred more success, validation had followed validation. His relationship with Vanessa had evolved from passionate affair to comfortable partnership. They moved through the elite circles of Chicago with practiced ease, charity galas, exclusive clubs, weekend retreats with people whose names appeared on the Forbes list. They were the perfect power couple, their images carefully curated for maximum impact. Yet for all his outward success, Alex occasionally found himself standing at his floor-to-ceiling windows in the dead of night, staring at the city lights with a hollow feeling he couldn't quite name. In these unguarded moments, the victory felt emptier than he had anticipated, the achievement less satisfying than the pursuit had been. The board approved the arts education initiative, Alex said, loosening his tie as he walked into the living room where Vanessa sat scrolling through her phone. $5 million over 3 years with a launch gala next month. Vanessa looked up, her expression brightening. Perfect timing. The PR team can leverage this for the quarterly report. She patted the space beside her on the designer sofa. Rebecca called about the Thompson merger. They're getting nervous. This was their routine. Business discussions bleeding into personal time, strategy sessions over dinner, networking even in moments of intimacy. It was efficient, productive, mutually beneficial. Yet sometimes in the quiet spaces between words, Alex caught himself remembering different conversations from a different life. Sarah discussing her students' achievements with genuine emotion, debating books they'd read, planning weekend hikes with no agenda beyond enjoyment. He pushed those thoughts away. That life belonged to a different man. A less successful man. A man who hadn't yet realized his full potential. I'll need to attend the rehearsal for the gala, he said, checking his calendar. They're having some children's choir perform. Makes for good optics. I have that Fashion Week event in New York, Vanessa replied without looking up. You can handle it on your own. Alex nodded, the decision made without discussion. Their relationship operated on practicality and independence. No messy emotions, no needless dependencies. It was exactly what he had wanted. Wasn't it? The following week found Alex sitting alone in the empty auditorium of the Lakeside Cultural Center, checking emails on his phone while a harried choir director arranged 20 small children on risers. He had planned to make a brief appearance, say the right words to the organizers, and leave the details to his staff. But his assistant had insisted he stay for at least part of the rehearsal, something about authentic engagement with the cause. "All right, little stars, from the beginning," the director called, raising her hands. Alex glanced up, his attention caught by the clear, sweet voices rising in harmony. The children ranged from 4 to 6 years old, dressed in matching blue t-shirts, some fidgeting, others standing with serious concentration. His gaze drifted across their faces, a smile tugging at his lips despite himself. Then he saw them. 3 children standing side by side in the back row. 3 identical faces with dark hair and striking features. 3 pairs of eyes that he recognized with visceral certainty. His eyes. His mother's cheekbones. His father's determined jaw. The phone slipped from his hand, clattering to the floor. Alex stood abruptly, the blood draining from his face as realization slammed into him with physical force. It wasn't possible. Yet it was undeniable. The little girl on the end, the smallest of the 3, looked directly at him then, her gaze curious and untroubled. She didn't know. How could she? But something in that innocent gaze shattered something fundamental inside him. "Mr. Mercer? Is everything all right?" The event coordinator had appeared at his side, concern evident in her voice. Alex couldn't answer. His eyes remained fixed on the children. His children, as the choir continued to sing, oblivious to the earthquake occurring in his reality. Those 3 children in the back, he managed finally, his voice strange to his own ears. "The triplets. What's their last name?" The coordinator followed his gaze. "Oh, the Mercer triplets. Lovely children. Their mother runs our education program. Would you like to meet them after rehearsal?" Mercer. They had his name. These children he had never known existed carried his name. The implications crashed through him in devastating waves. Sarah had been pregnant when he left. Sarah had given birth to his children, not 1 but 3. Sarah had raised them alone, without telling him, without seeking his support, without giving him the chance to be their father. Anger, shock, and a crushing guilt collided inside him. He had walked away from his marriage, from his wife, but he had never chosen to walk away from his children. That choice had been made for him. When the rehearsal ended, Alex stood frozen, watching as a woman entered from a side door. Sarah. Her hair was shorter than he remembered, her frame slighter, but her movements were achingly familiar. The way she knelt to speak to one of the children, the gentle touch as she straightened a little boy's collar. The children surrounded her, all 3 talking at once, their small hands gesturing animatedly. She listened with complete attention, nodding seriously at whatever they were saying. A family. Complete without him. Alex moved without conscious decision, his legs carrying him across the auditorium floor. Sarah looked up at his approach, her expression shifting from confusion to shock to a resigned alertness, as if she had always known this moment would come. "Alex," she said simply, standing to face him. "They're mine." Not a question. He knew with absolute certainty. Sarah's chin lifted slightly. "Yes." The 3 children looked between the adults with curious expressions, sensing the tension but not understanding its source. "Mom?" asked the little boy, his voice uncertain. "Who is this?" Sarah hesitated, her eyes never leaving Alex's face. "This is an old friend of mine." "They don't know," Alex said flatly, the words both accusation and realization. "Not yet." Sarah's voice was steady, but he could see the rapid pulse at her throat. This isn't the place for this conversation. Alex wanted to argue, to demand answers, to express the hurricane of emotions tearing through him. But even in his shock, he recognized the truth in her words. Not here. Not in front of 3 innocent children whose world was about to change irrevocably. "Tomorrow," he said, his voice low and intense. "We talk tomorrow." Sarah nodded once, her hand instinctively moving to gather the children closer. "My house. 10 o'clock. As Alex walked away, his mind reeling with implications and questions, he heard one of the children, the assertive little girl who had to be the oldest, asking, "Mom, why did that man look so angry?" He didn't hear Sarah's answer. But the question itself lodged in his chest like a physical pain. In their eyes, he wasn't a father denied his rights. He wasn't a man who had missed 4 years of their lives. He was just a stranger who had looked at their mother with anger. For the first time since walking away from his marriage, Alex Mercer confronted the full weight of what he had lost, what he had thrown away in his pursuit of a different life. And for the first time he had no idea how to fix what was broken. Alex spent the night in a haze of disbelief and preparation. He canceled meetings, ignored Vanessa's calls, and researched everything he could about paternal rights, about child development, about the impact of absent fathers. By morning, his emotional turmoil had crystallized into a steely determination. These were his children. He had rights. He would be part of their lives. Sarah's home surprised him, not the modest apartment he had expected, but a well-maintained brownstone on a tree-lined street. Children's bicycles leaned against the porch railing. Chalk drawings decorated the sidewalk. It looked like a home lived in and loved. She opened the door before he could knock, her expression guarded. The children are with their nanny at the park. We have 2 hours. The living room was bright and comfortable, toys neatly organized on shelves, framed artwork, clearly created by small hands, hanging on the walls. Photos covered one entire wall: 3 newborns in hospital bassinets, 3 toddlers splashing in a kiddie pool, 3 preschoolers proudly holding up finger paintings. A documented life he had missed entirely. When were you going to tell me? Alex demanded, his voice tight with controlled anger. Sarah sat across from him, her posture straight but not rigid. Honestly? I don't know. You had no right to keep this from me. Maybe not, she conceded, surprising him. But at the time, I made the decision I thought was best for them. Best for them? Or easiest for you? The accusation hung between them. Sarah's eyes flashed. Nothing about this has been easy, Alex. Nothing. You should have told me when you found out you were pregnant. Should I? Her voice was quiet but intense. You had just left me for another woman. You had made it very clear that your new life didn't include me. Why would I believe it would include them? Alex ran a hand through his hair, frustration building. That was different. This is what? Your choice. Sarah leaned forward. You chose to walk away from our marriage. I chose to protect my children from becoming an obligation to a father who didn't want the life they came with. Our children, he corrected automatically. Yes, she acknowledged. Biologically they are our children. But for 4 years they have been mine in every way that matters. I have been there for every fever, every nightmare, every first word, every scraped knee. The truth of her words stung more than he expected. He had missed everything: their birth, their first steps, their first words. Moments he could never reclaim. Tell me about them, he said finally, his voice softening despite himself. Something in Sarah's expression shifted. This at least was safe ground. Emma is the oldest by 2 minutes. She's our leader, determined, fearless, always in charge. Noah came next. He's our thinker, cautious, observant, with a memory that misses nothing. Lily is the youngest and smallest. She's sensitive, intuitive, and most like you. Alex absorbed this information like a man dying of thirst. Do they ask about me? Sarah hesitated. They've started to. They know they have a father who lives somewhere else. They know you left before they were born. They don't know details. What will you tell them now? I don't know yet. She met his gaze directly. What do you want, Alex? Really want? Because if you think you can waltz in and out of their lives when it's convenient for you, or use them as some kind of accessory to your success story, I will fight you with everything I have. The fierceness in her voice was unmistakable, a mother lion protecting her cubs. It should have angered him. Instead, he found himself respecting her for it. I want to know them, he said with unexpected honesty. I want them to know me. As what? The father who suddenly appears in their lives? The man who left their mother? How do we explain that to 3-4-year-olds without damaging them? Alex hadn't considered the practical complexities. In his business world, problems had solutions. Negotiations had clear objectives. This was uncharted territory. We start slow, he suggested, the plan forming as he spoke. I'm introduced as your friend. They get comfortable with me. Then when the time is right, we tell them the truth. Sarah studied him, searching for something in his expression. And if they reject you? If they're angry? If they need time? Will your ego survive that? The question hit harder than she probably intended. Would his ego survive rejection from his own children? Would he have the patience to earn their trust rather than demanding it? I don't know, he admitted. But I want to try. Something in his honesty seemed to reach her. Sarah sighed, the tension in her shoulders easing slightly. One meeting. Here, in their home where they feel safe. We see how it goes. No promises beyond that. It wasn't what he wanted. It wasn't nearly enough. But it was a beginning. When? This weekend. Saturday morning. They're always most energetic in the mornings. Alex nodded, the reality of what he was agreeing to suddenly overwhelming. He was going to meet his children, not as their father, but as a stranger they had no reason to care about. There's something else you should know, Sarah added. Something important. Alex braced himself, wondering what other life-altering revelation could possibly follow what he'd already learned. They've never had a father figure in their lives. No boyfriends, no male role models who were anything more than friends or teachers. You'll be entering uncharted territory for them. She paused. Please don't disappoint them, Alex. They've never experienced that kind of hurt before. The weight of responsibility settled over him like a physical thing. In business, failure meant financial loss, damaged reputation, lessons learned. Here, failure meant something infinitely more precious could be broken. As he left Sarah's house that day, Alex felt fundamentally changed. The man who had walked up those steps 3 hours earlier, angry, entitled, certain of his rights, was not the same man who walked down them now. He had entered demanding to be acknowledged as a father. He was leaving with the humbling understanding that fatherhood was something he would need to earn. His phone buzzed insistently in his pocket. Vanessa again. The board, his assistant, the endless demands of the empire he had built. For the first time in years, Alex let the calls go unanswered. There were more important things to consider now. 3 more important things. The days until Saturday stretched endlessly before him. Alex found himself distracted in meetings, his mind wandering to questions he had never considered. Did they like sports? Did they have allergies? Were they afraid of the dark? What made them laugh? What made them cry? He caught himself in a toy store on Thursday, staring at shelves of games and stuffed animals with complete bewilderment. What did 4-year-olds even like? Should he bring gifts to this first meeting, or would that seem like bribery? He left empty-handed, more uncertain than when he'd entered. Friday night, he stood in his expansive closet, surveying rows of custom suits and designer casual wear with growing frustration. Nothing seemed right for meeting his children for the first time. Too formal, too stuffy, too intimidating. He finally settled on jeans and a simple button-down shirt, clothes he rarely wore but that might make him seem more approachable, less like the stranger he was. When Saturday morning arrived, Alex found himself sitting in his parked car outside Sarah's brownstone a full 20 minutes early, his heart pounding with an anxiety he hadn't felt since his first major investor pitch over a decade ago. The stakes had been high then. They were incalculable now. At precisely 10 o'clock he walked up the steps and rang the doorbell, feeling like a man about to step off a cliff with no certainty of what waited below. The door opened to reveal Sarah, casual in weekend clothes, her expression a careful neutral. "They're in the playroom," she said. "I've told them my old friend is visiting and is excited to meet them." Alex nodded, unable to form words around the tightness in his throat. She led him through the house to a sunny room at the back, where 3 small figures were engaged in building what appeared to be a massive block tower. "Emma, Noah, Lily," Sarah called softly. "This is my friend Alex." 3 identical faces turned toward him, 3 pairs of eyes, his eyes, regarding him with varying degrees of curiosity, caution, and openness. In that moment, something shifted in Alex's universe, realigning everything he thought he had known about himself, about his life, about what mattered. These weren't abstract concepts anymore. They weren't legal rights to be demanded or negotiated. They were real, living, breathing parts of himself that had existed in the world without him knowing. And now that he had seen them, now that he stood in their presence, he knew with absolute certainty that nothing would ever be the same again. The first meeting was simple but profound. Alex sat on the floor of Sarah's living room, awkwardly building block towers with 3 children who had no idea they were his own. "Do you build things too?" Emma asked bluntly. "I build companies," Alex replied. "Like a team." Emma nodded, satisfied with this explanation. Throughout the afternoon, Alex absorbed every detail hungrily: Emma's natural leadership, Noah's careful analysis, Lily's quiet sensitivity. He saw himself in them, but also saw Sarah's influence in their kindness and curiosity. "Will you come back?" Lily asked as he prepared to leave, her small hand slipping into his. "I would love to," he replied, looking to Sarah for permission. "We could do this again next weekend," she offered cautiously. "Maybe the park if the weather's good." Driving home, Alex found his priorities shifting. The urgent calls and messages from work, from Vanessa, suddenly seemed less important. For the first time in years he questioned the life he had built. At home, Vanessa waited with barely contained impatience. "Where have you been?" "I had some personal matters to attend to," he said inadequately. "This is about the woman at the gala, isn't it? The one with the triplets." "She's my ex-wife," he admitted. "And the children are mine. Children I never knew existed until a week ago." Vanessa's expression shifted from shock to calculated assessment. "This doesn't have to change anything. You hire a good lawyer, arrange visitation, pay child support." It's a complication, not a catastrophe. It's not that simple, he said quietly. I can't just be a weekend father who pays child support. They deserve more than that. Looking at Vanessa's cool, beautiful face, Alex realized that the life they had built together suddenly felt hollow compared to a few hours spent in Sarah's modest home with 3 children who shared his eyes. I don't have all the answers yet, he said honestly. But I know I can't go back to the way things were. Weeks passed as Alex became a regular presence in the children's lives. Each visit revealed new discoveries: Emma's fearless enthusiasm, Noah's methodical mind, Lily's gentle perceptiveness. Each goodbye grew harder. His corporate life suffered. Board members noticed his distraction, his sudden unavailability on weekends. Vanessa withdrew, watching his transformation with cold calculation. At the park one Sunday morning, as Alex pushed Emma on the swings, Lily asked the innocent question that changed everything: "What do dads do?" The question hung in the air. Alex's hands stilled on the swing chains, his eyes finding Sarah's across the playground. Something in her expression shifted, a recognition that the moment had arrived. She walked over and knelt beside Lily. Dads do lots of different things. They help take care of their children, they play with them, they love them very much. Like Chen's dad, Noah nodded. He fixes things and reads stories in funny voices. Sarah's eyes met Alex's, a silent communication passing between them. She nodded slightly. Emma, can you stop swinging for a minute? Sarah asked gently. We need to talk to you 3 about something important. The children gathered around, expressions curious. Alex knelt beside Sarah, heart pounding. Remember how we've talked about your dad? Sarah began. About how he lives somewhere else. Well, sometimes life is complicated. Alex isn't just my friend. He's actually your father. 3 pairs of identical eyes turned to him, expressions ranging from confusion to disbelief. But you said our dad wasn't here, Emma accused Sarah. He wasn't, Sarah confirmed. Alex and I were apart before you were born. He didn't know about you until he saw you at the choir practice. That's why you look like us, Noah said, studying Alex's face. Lily has your eyes. If you're our dad, why don't you live with us? Emma demanded. The directness of her question stunned him. Alex looked to Sarah, panic evident in his expression. Your dad and I made choices before you were born, Sarah explained gently. We decided not to be married anymore. But that doesn't mean he can't be part of your lives now. Do you want to be our dad? Lily asked quietly, her small face serious. Alex felt tears threatening. More than anything in the world, he whispered. The children processed this revelation differently. Emma maintained suspicious distance, demanding proof and explanations. Noah observed carefully, asking logical questions about what would change. Lily, to everyone's surprise, simply reached for Alex's hand and held it. I always knew we had a dad somewhere, she said with a child's simple acceptance. Walking back to the cars afterward, Sarah touched Alex's arm lightly. This is just the beginning, she warned. There will be questions, confusion, maybe anger. They'll need time. I have time, Alex promised. I'm not going anywhere. As he drove home that evening, his phone rang. Vanessa. He let it go to voicemail. His priorities had shifted irrevocably. The life he had chosen was no longer the life he wanted. The weeks following the revelation were turbulent. Emma maintained her distance, testing Alex with difficult questions and occasional defiance. Noah studied him with analytical curiosity, carefully cataloging each interaction. Only Lily embraced him without reservation, her trust both a gift and a responsibility he feared failing. You can't just show up and expect us to love you, Emma declared during one tense moment. You weren't here before. You're right, Alex admitted, her brutal honesty stinging but necessary. I wasn't here and I missed so much. I can't change that. But I'm here now and I want to be here tomorrow and the day after that. Slowly, tentatively, the walls began to crumble. Emma allowed him to teach her chess, silently proud when she captured his king. Noah shared his science books, explaining complex ideas with serious importance. Lily simply slipped her hand into his whenever they walked anywhere, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. At work, Alex initiated changes that shocked the corporate world. He stepped back as CEO, appointing his CFO to take operational control. He restructured his schedule, delegated responsibilities he had once jealously guarded, and established firm boundaries around his time. You're throwing away everything you've built, one board member accused during a heated meeting. I'm not throwing it away, Alex corrected calmly. I'm reprioritizing. His relationship with Vanessa ended with surprising civility. She had seen the changes coming, had calculated her options with the same pragmatism that had initially attracted him. "We want different things," she said simply. "We always did, really. You wanted success as validation. I wanted it for its own sake." She moved out on a Tuesday, her carefully curated possessions packed with efficient precision. Alex felt relief rather than loss as he watched her go. The true test came during a school festival at the Triplets preschool. Other parents whispered as he entered with Sarah, speculation rippling through the crowd. They sat together watching the children perform, an awkward not-quite family still finding their boundaries. Emma spotted him in the audience and for the first time, waved excitedly. Noah pointed him out to their teacher with serious importance. "That's my dad." Lily ran to him afterward, throwing herself into his arms with complete trust. "You came," she said simply. "I promised I would," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. Later that evening, dropping the children off after ice cream, Alex lingered at Sarah's door. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For them. For letting me in." Sarah studied him thoughtfully. "You're not the man who left," she observed. "No," he agreed. "I'm not. They need consistency, Alex. Not grand gestures, not expensive gifts. Just someone who shows up, day after day. That's who I want to be," he promised. "That's who I'm becoming." As he drove away, his phone buzzed with a message from his realtor. The house he'd inquired about, just 3 blocks from Sarah's, was available. A modest home, nothing like his mansion but walking distance to the children. He confirmed his interest immediately. The corporate titan who had once measured his worth in acquisitions and stock prices now found himself researching school districts and children's birthday party venues. The man who had abandoned a marriage for something bigger, now wanted nothing more than to be worthy of 3 small lives that shared his eyes. 6 months transformed Alex Mercer's life completely. The glass-walled penthouse had been sold, the mansion listed on the market. He now lived in a comfortable home with a backyard perfect for 3 energetic children. His walls displayed crayon drawings rather than expensive art. His weekends revolved around soccer games and science museums rather than charity galas. The triplets spent every Wednesday evening and alternate weekends with him, a schedule that had evolved naturally as trust grew. His home contained 3 carefully decorated bedrooms, each reflecting its occupant's personality. Emma's painted bold blue with star charts on the ceiling, Noah's lined with bookshelves for his growing collection, Lily's soft green with fairy lights strung across the windows. Today was special, their 5th birthday. Alex arrived at Sarah's home early, arms loaded with carefully chosen gifts and a cake from their favorite bakery. "Dad." Lily spotted him first, running to the door in her party dress. The word still filled his chest with emotion every time he heard it. Noah approached with his usual careful observation. "You got chocolate cake. With the raspberry filling?" "Just like you requested," Alex confirmed. Emma bounded down the stairs in a superhero cape over her dress. "Did you bring the science kit? The one with real experiments?" "I brought exactly what each of you asked for," he promised. "No more, no less." Sarah appeared in the doorway to the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. "You're early. I thought I could help set up," he offered. Something in her expression softened. Over months of co-parenting, their relationship had evolved from tense civility to genuine respect, and recently to something that felt almost like friendship. The backyard had been transformed with balloons and streamers. Friends from school would arrive soon, but for now, it was just the 5 of them, a family configuration none of them had anticipated but which had begun to feel surprisingly right. As Alex hung decorations following Emma's precise instructions, he caught Sarah watching him, a thoughtful expression on her face. "What?" he asked. "Just thinking about how much has changed," she replied. "A year ago they didn't even know you existed." "A year ago I didn't know they existed," he countered. "Or how empty my life was without them." The party unfolded in joyful chaos, games, presents, children hyped on sugar and excitement. Throughout it all, Alex found himself watching Sarah, her patience with overexcited 5-year-olds, her quiet competence, her unrestrained laughter at their antics. When the last guest departed and the triplets crashed from their sugar high, Alex and Sarah found themselves alone on her porch steps, surveying the aftermath of celebration. "They're happy," Sarah said quietly. "You've done that. Made their world more complete." "They've done the same for me," he admitted. "I thought I had everything before. I had nothing that mattered." Sarah studied him in the fading light. "You really have changed. For the better, I hope." "Definitely for the better." The silence between them felt comfortable, a far cry from the tense standoffs of their early interactions. "I've been thinking," Alex said carefully. "The children are starting kindergarten soon. You'll have more time for yourself, for your career." She nodded, waiting. "The educational foundation I started is looking for a director. Someone who understands curriculum development, who has real classroom experience, who cares about making a difference." He paused. "Someone like you." Sarah's eyes widened. "Are you offering me a job?" "I'm suggesting a possibility," he clarified. "The foundation is independent from my company. You'd report to the board, not to me. It would be your program to build." She considered this, her expression thoughtful. "I'll think about it," she said finally. "It's been a long time since I've thought about my career beyond consulting." "You'd be amazing," he said simply. The birthday had brought another milestone. Emma had finally fully accepted him. As the party wound down, she had approached him with uncharacteristic hesitation. "Dad." The word still sounded new from her lips. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything," he'd promised. "Why did you leave Mom? Before we were born?" The question he'd been dreading, delivered with a child's direct curiosity. He'd looked to Sarah, who nodded slightly, permission to share a version of their truth. "I made a mistake," he told Emma honestly. "I thought other things were more important, success, money being important. I was wrong." "But you came back," she said, processing this. "As soon as I knew about you three," he confirmed. "And it was the best decision I ever made." She had accepted this with serious consideration before declaring, "Don't make that mistake again," and returning to her cake. Now, sitting beside Sarah in the quiet aftermath of celebration, Alex felt a sense of peace he'd never known in his years of corporate success. "I never thanked you," he said suddenly. "For what?" "For raising them alone for 4 years. For doing such an amazing job. For letting me back into your life when you had every reason not to." Sarah smiled, a genuine warmth in her expression. They deserved to know their father. Especially when he turned out to be a pretty good one. A small noise from the doorway caught their attention. Lily stood there in her pajamas, clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit. "I can't sleep," she announced. "Too much cake." Sarah started to rise, but Alex touched her arm gently. "I've got this. If that's okay?" She nodded, settling back onto the step. Alex scooped Lily into his arms, her small weight familiar now. "How about a story? One about a princess who's also a scientist. With a dragon who's misunderstood?" she requested sleepily. "Absolutely," he agreed, carrying her inside. Through the open door, Sarah watched as Alex settled into the children's reading chair, Lily curled trustingly against his chest. His voice rose and fell in the animated storytelling that had become his specialty, creating worlds where princesses conducted experiments and dragons just needed friends. Noah and Emma, hearing the story begin, appeared from their rooms and climbed onto the chair with their sister, the three of them fitting perfectly in the space created by their father's arms. In that moment, watching the man who had once abandoned her now holding their children with such gentle care, Sarah felt the last of her old anger dissolve. The path that had brought them here had been painful, complicated, filled with mistakes and misunderstandings. But seeing Alex with their children, seeing the father he had become, the man he had grown into, she couldn't regret the journey. Sometimes the longest routes led exactly where you needed to be. As the story concluded and 3 sleepy children were tucked back into their beds, Alex returned to the porch where Sarah waited. Something had shifted between them, a new understanding, a possible future neither had anticipated. "They're asleep," he said softly, settling beside her again. "You're good at that," she observed. "The bedtime routine. I had an excellent teacher." He smiled at her, the expression reaching his eyes in a way it never had during their marriage. The night stretched comfortable around them, stars emerging in the darkening sky. Neither felt compelled to fill the silence with words. There would be time for conversations, for possibilities, for whatever might grow in this unexpected second chapter. For now, it was enough to sit together on the porch steps of a home filled with sleeping children, 3 miraculous lives who had changed everything, who had brought a father home in ways he had never expected, who had taught a successful man the true meaning of wealth. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. Hit the bell icon so you never miss a new video. If you enjoyed this, check out our other videos, there's plenty more to explore.